What would you do if your peaceful dream home suddenly turned into a battlefield, all because of one entitled neighbor? A quiet afternoon takes a shocking turn, and what happens next will leave you speechless. Stay till the end to see how justice finds its way in the most unexpected form. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more incredible stories. Michael Carter had always dreamed of this moment. After 15 years of dedicated service as a police officer, working long shifts, overtime, and saving every penny, he finally stood at the threshold of his dream home. A beautiful 2-story house in one of Atlanta's most prestigious neighborhoods. The kind of place his parents could only dream about. A symbol of everything he had worked so hard for. He took a deep breath, savoring the feeling of accomplishment. The sun glinted off the pristine swimming pool in the backyard, the water so clear it looked like glass. This was his sanctuary now, his reward after years of sacrifice. The move-in truck had just pulled away when Michael began arranging his patio furniture, setting up the space he envisioned as his weekend retreat. As he adjusted the lounge chairs, he felt a pair of eyes watching him. Looking up, he noticed a woman standing at a second-floor window of the house next door. Blonde, sharply dressed even for a Saturday afternoon, phone pressed tightly against her ear. Her cold gaze locked onto Michael like he was a trespasser. He gave a polite wave. She didn't wave back. Instead, she disappeared behind the curtain. Michael felt a chill run down his spine but quickly shrugged it off. New neighborhood, new people. Maybe she was just curious. The next day, Michael made a run to the hardware store to grab supplies. Halfway through the checkout line, his phone pinged with a security alert. He'd set up one camera facing the backyard just in case. Curious, he pulled up the feed. His jaw clenched. There she was, the same woman from the window, casually strolling through his backyard gate, wearing a designer swimsuit and carrying a luxury beach towel. She acted like she owned the place, setting her towel on his pool chair and dipping her feet into his pool water. Michael rushed home, disbelief boiling into anger. He approached calmly, years of de-escalation training keeping him in check. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you?" he asked, his voice firm but polite. The woman flinched, then placed a hand dramatically over her chest. "Oh, I thought you were the new pool guy. The previous owners always let me use the pool. I've been doing this for years," she smiled sweetly, but there was nothing genuine in her expression. Michael shook his head. "No, ma'am, I'm not the maintenance man. I'm the new owner. This is my home now." He waited for his words to sink in. The woman's face twisted, a mixture of shock and something uglier. "You? The owner?" She laughed nervously, eyes scanning him from head to toe. "There must be some mistake. I know the realtor handling this property. She would have told me." Her voice trailed off, leaving the racist implication dangling between them. "There's no mistake, Mrs. Thompson," Michael replied calmly. "This is my property, and you're trespassing. Please leave." She scoffed, gathering her things. "We'll see about that," she muttered, her words not just a retort, but a threat. Michael stood still, watching her exit through his gate. He had dealt with people like her before, but something about her made his gut tighten. The following week was quiet. Michael focused on settling in, unpacking boxes, and personalizing his space. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time he stepped into his backyard, he caught a glimpse of that same curtain twitching. He ignored it at first, but then came the next incident. One early Saturday morning, Michael awoke to the sound of splashing and laughter. Alarmed, he glanced out his window. What he saw made his blood boil. Karen Thompson, the neighbor from hell, had brought 4 of her friends. They lounged in his chairs, champagne glasses in hand, laughing as if it were their own backyard. Michael stormed outside, his voice firm. "You need to leave, now. This is private property." Karen barely turned her head. "Oh, don't be so difficult." She waved a hand dismissively. "We're just having a little fun. Besides, you barely use this pool." One of the women shifted uncomfortably. "Karen said she had permission," she whispered. Sensing the rising tension, they began gathering their things. Michael stood his ground. "This is your final warning, Mrs. Thompson. If you trespass again, I will call the police." Karen sneered. "Go ahead. My husband plays golf with Captain Richards. I know everyone at the precinct." Michael didn't respond. Instead, that afternoon, he installed 2 more cameras. He'd seen this kind of behavior escalate before. It was always better to document everything. The next few days confirmed his instincts. Footage showed Karen testing his gates, peeking through his windows, even trying to use an old key, probably copied from the previous owners. It was an invasion, plain and simple. Yet Michael held back. He needed irrefutable proof. Then came the book club incident. Michael returned from grocery shopping to find 8 women drinking wine, lounging around his pool like it was a resort. Karen saw him and immediately turned on the theatrics. "Oh, officers, I'm so glad you're here," she cried when Michael called the police. Officers Davis and Martinez arrived, both men he knew from his years on the force. "Mr. Carter was one of our best." Martinez cut in before she could spin her web of lies. "If he says you're trespassing, you're trespassing." Karen's face turned crimson, but she held her ground. "This isn't over. You don't belong here. I'll make sure everyone knows it." From that day, the campaign against Michael intensified. Anonymous complaints about his lawn, posts on the community Facebook page about a suspicious man at his address, even his morning papers started disappearing. But the cameras captured everything. Karen's early morning newspaper thefts, her photograph in his home at night, even sprinkling something over his prized roses. Michael watched it all, the knot in his stomach growing. This was no longer about a pool. It was about driving him out, about proving to everyone that he didn't belong. But Michael Carter had faced worse. He wasn't going anywhere. The chapter closed with Michael sitting by his pool, staring at the water reflecting the Georgia sun. He knew it was only the beginning. Karen Thompson had made her move. Now it was his turn to play smart. The days that followed grew heavier as Michael felt the shift in the neighborhood's atmosphere. Karen Thompson had made it clear that she wasn't going to back down easily. She had tasted power in the community for far too long, and now that control was slipping from her hands. The first sign of escalation came when Michael noticed a police cruiser slowly driving past his home 3 times in one morning. It wasn't a coincidence. Michael had worked the streets long enough to know the difference between routine patrol and someone being sent to check things out. Later that week, an officer knocked on his door. Michael opened it to find a young officer with a stiff posture and wary eyes. "Sir, we received an anonymous complaint about suspicious activity on your property," the officer said, glancing around as if expecting to see something illegal. Michael's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice even. "Suspicious activity? Like what?" The officer shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "Anonymous caller didn't specify, just said you've been acting strange around the neighborhood. We're obligated to follow up." Michael stared at the officer, his police instincts recognizing the setup. "You're wasting your time, officer, but I get it. You're doing your job." As the officer left, Michael caught a glimpse of Karen peeking through her curtains, her phone still in hand. He knew without a doubt she was behind it. But this was only the beginning. The very next morning, Michael found a small Ziploc bag lying suspiciously near his back fence, a white powder inside. Any average person might have panicked, but Michael knew better. Years on, the force had taught him to spot staged evidence. He took photos, donned gloves, and bagged it himself. Whatever game Karen was playing, she was escalating fast. Michael's frustrations grew as the neighborhood began to turn cold. People he hadn't even met yet looked at him with suspicion. Whispers followed him at the grocery store, and his morning jogs now felt like walking through a minefield of stairs. It wasn't long before the community's HOA started getting involved. He received a formal letter citing several complaints: unkempt lawn, loud noises, suspicious visitors. All lies. Michael kept his yard immaculate and barely had any visitors. Determined not to be pushed out, Michael installed additional cameras around the house. Every angle of his property was now under surveillance. He knew he had to be methodical. A man in his position couldn't afford mistakes. Karen wanted him to snap, to give her something real to use against him. But Michael Carter was patient. Then came the second direct confrontation. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Michael stepped out to mow his perfectly trimmed lawn, only to find Karen standing at the edge of his property, arms crossed. "You're bringing down the value of this neighborhood," she spat. Michael blinked slowly, resisting the urge to respond. "You don't belong here. People are talking. They're worried." Michael glanced at his camera, recording every word. "If they're worried, they're welcome to talk to me," he replied calmly. Karen scoffed, eyes burning with hatred. "Oh, they will. Don't think your little cameras will protect you. I've been part of this community long before you ever showed your face here." She turned and marched back to her house, but Michael knew the war had just begun. That evening, Michael noticed a new thread on the neighborhood's Facebook group. Anonymous posts described a suspicious male figure seen loitering near homes, lingering around the pool area, and acting aggressively. Michael's address was tagged. The comments section was full of Karen's friends stirring the pot. "We have to protect our community. Should we start a neighborhood watch? Maybe the police need to get more involved." Michael felt a wave of rage, but forced himself to breathe. He documented every screenshot, every comment, knowing that gathering evidence was his strongest weapon. The next day, the neighborhood woke up to another stunt. Someone had broken his sprinkler heads overnight. Water gushed onto his lawn, pooling near the sidewalk. He checked his cameras immediately. The footage was clear. Karen, in her robe and slippers, walking confidently across the yard at 2 a.m. with garden shears in hand. The audacity made his blood boil. Michael submitted the footage to the HOA. For the first time, the president of the association hesitated. "Mr. Carter, I'm not saying this isn't serious, but Karen is, well, she's very involved here. Maybe it's best to let this one slide. You don't want to make enemies." Michael's eyes hardened. "I didn't come here to make enemies, but I won't be bullied out of my own home." Karen's next move was more calculated. She approached a local real estate agent and started spreading the rumor that Michael was planning to rent out the property to undesirable elements. By the end of the week, half the neighborhood believed he was turning his home into a halfway house. The stares grew colder, the whispers louder, but Michael endured. The tipping point came when he caught Karen in the act again. This time, she was at his rose garden with a small bag labeled Weed Killer. Michael watched from his kitchen window as she sprinkled the contents carefully, ensuring to hit every root of his prized roses. He grabbed his phone and recorded the entire scene. The next morning, his once vibrant flowers were wilting, leaves shriveled, petals blackened. Michael knew the time for patience was running out. He needed a plan, something that would expose Karen and finally turn the tide. But for now, he stored the footage, every file carefully labeled and backed up. The situation had moved beyond a simple neighborhood dispute. This was warfare. By the end of the week, Michael received another HOA notice, this one threatening fines if the disturbances didn't stop. He almost laughed. He hadn't made a sound. Yet Karen's influence was everywhere. Still, he wasn't ready to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. He knew better. You don't fight fire with fire. You wait. You gather. And then you strike where it hurts the most. Michael sat by his pool that night, staring at the reflections dancing on the surface. In the distance, he could hear laughter. Karen and her guests enjoying their evening, oblivious to the growing storm. He smiled faintly to himself, knowing that the next move was his. For the first time in weeks, he felt in control again. Michael knew the situation could not continue much longer. Every day brought a new level of harassment, and Karen's actions became bolder as if testing how far she could push before he broke. Yet, Michael stayed patient. He continued gathering evidence, documenting every incident, every trespass, every insult. He knew the power of proof, and his time on the force taught him that sometimes the most powerful weapon was patience. The turning point came with the monthly HOA meeting. Michael had debated attending, unsure if facing a room full of Karen's allies was worth it. But in the end, he decided it was time to confront the whispers directly. The meeting was held at the local clubhouse, a pristine building that screamed suburban perfection. As Michael entered, conversations hushed. He could feel every eye on him, measuring, judging. Karen was there, of course, seated near the front, her posture perfect, lips curved in a smug smile. She was surrounded by the usual circle of friends who had supported her campaigns in the Facebook group and HOA complaints. Michael took a seat near the back, phone in hand, ready. The HOA president cleared his throat and began the meeting with the usual topics: maintenance budgets, landscaping, neighborhood events. Then came the moment Michael expected. Karen stood gracefully and addressed the room, her voice full of feigned concern. "I think it's time we discuss the recent changes in our neighborhood," she began. "Many of us have worked hard to maintain the standards of our community, but lately there have been incidents." She glanced directly at Michael, allowing the insinuation to hang in the air. "I'm just concerned about property values. Potential buyers have mentioned their discomfort. It's something we should all be aware of." There were murmurs of agreement, a few nods from her closest allies. Michael felt the weight of the moment, but remained still. When the president asked if anyone else had something to add, Michael stood. Slowly, purposefully, he walked to the front, phone still in hand. "It's interesting you mention property values, Mrs. Thompson," he began, his voice calm but carrying enough authority to command the room, "because I have something to share that directly impacts those values." He connected his phone to the projector and the screen came alive. The first footage showed Karen sneaking into his yard at night, garden shears in hand, cutting the sprinkler heads. Gasps filled the room. Then came the clip of her sprinkling poison over his roses, the timestamp glowing in the corner. Karen's face drained of color, but Michael wasn't finished. "This was last Tuesday," he said, pointing to the screen. "11:47 p.m., Mrs. Thompson. Care to explain?" The room was silent, every eye now on Karen. She stumbled for words, her voice breaking. I was checking for suspicious activity. I thought I saw someone damaging property, and I was trying to help." Laughter rippled through the crowd, the lie too weak to stand on its own. Michael smiled faintly, letting the silence speak volumes. Now we all know who's really been damaging the neighborhood. The meeting ended with no further discussion from Karen. She left quickly, her usual entourage silent and avoiding eye contact. But Michael knew this wasn't the end. That evening, when he returned home, he found his pool water filled with thick bubbles. Dish soap had been dumped into the system, turning the pristine water into a foamy mess. Michael stood there, watching the bubbles drift lazily across the surface, the smell of chemicals strong in the air. He felt the familiar knot of anger and frustration twist in his gut, but forced himself to stay calm. Then came the idea. A plan formed slowly, inspired by an old case he'd worked years ago involving pool maintenance dyes. A special non-toxic, temporary dye used to detect leaks. But this dye had another property. It reacted when it came into contact with specific chemicals found in expensive sunscreens and cosmetics. Michael researched carefully, confirming his memory. The dye was invisible until activated. Once it reacted, it stained skin a bright, unmistakable green. Harmless, temporary, but impossible to ignore. Michael ordered the dye, making sure it was the right concentration and completely safe. When it arrived, he tested it in a bucket, adding a dollop of high-end sunscreen, the same brand Karen always left behind on his pool chairs. The result was perfect. The water stayed clear until contact, then bloomed into a vivid green stain. Not harmful, not permanent, but humiliating. Michael waited, gathering his resources, setting up extra cameras to capture every angle of his yard. He knew Karen wasn't done. She would try something else, and when she did, he'd be ready. His chance came sooner than expected. Through the grapevine, he heard whispers of another gathering. Karen's so-called book club was planning a private event by the pool. Code, of course, for another unauthorized party. Michael played his part perfectly. He made sure Karen saw him packing his car early Saturday morning. He even drove past her house, loud enough for her to notice. But instead of leaving, he parked around the corner and walked back to his home office, where his monitors gave him a perfect view of every inch of his property. He waited, phone in hand, as the cameras recorded in real time. Right on schedule, Karen appeared at his back gate, testing it like always. Satisfied that he was gone, she waved her friends over. 6 women in expensive swimsuits, carrying designer bags and bottles of champagne. They set up their little oasis, laughing and chatting like they owned the place. Karen raised her glass in a mock toast. "Ladies, welcome to our Saturday sanctuary. What the new owner doesn't know won't hurt him." Michael's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, recording everything. One by one, the women applied their sunscreens, slathering on thick layers of the very products Michael had tested. Karen was the first to dive in, creating a splash that shimmered in the afternoon sun. Her friends followed eagerly. At first, everything seemed normal, but Michael knew what was coming. He waited. It started slowly. Karen's friend Susan glanced at her arm, confusion spreading across her face. "Karen, is your skin changing color?" she asked, her voice trembling. Karen looked down, and the scream that followed pierced the quiet afternoon. Her pale skin was turning green, bright, unmistakable, almost glowing in the sunlight. Panic erupted. Women scrambled out of the pool, shrieking as their arms, legs, and faces turned green. Their expensive makeup streaked down their faces, mixing with the green hue, making them look grotesque. One woman wailed about her daughter's wedding next week, sobbing as she stared at her emerald-stained skin. Michael watched it all, emotionless, recording every second. Karen stood frozen, dripping green, rage contorting her features. Then her eyes found the camera, the small red light blinking steadily. She knew. She finally understood. The green exodus that followed was chaotic. 6 green-tinted women running down the neighborhood sidewalks, leaving wet footprints in their wake, their screams fading into the distance. Michael leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. The footage was gold. But this wasn't revenge. This was justice. Proof that sometimes karma didn't need help. It just needed a little push. Michael spent the rest of the evening reviewing the footage from every camera angle. The images of Karen and her friends scrambling out of the pool, dripping in green and shrieking in horror, played on a loop. It was everything he had hoped for. The next morning, Michael began editing the footage carefully. Years on the force taught him the importance of evidence presentation. He started the video with clips of Karen's earlier trespassing incidents, capturing her testing his gates, sneaking into his yard, and vandalizing his property. Then, he seamlessly transitioned to the footage of the unauthorized pool party, showing every second of the green disaster as it unfolded. To top it off, he added the same soft jazz music that had played from Karen's Bluetooth speaker during the party. The irony made the video even more satisfying. Once the video was complete, Michael uploaded it to several social media platforms. He didn't add any commentary. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. Within hours, the video started gaining traction. Comments poured in from strangers, neighbors, and even people from other cities who had stumbled upon the now viral clip. The title wrote itself, "Trespassing, Karen Gets Green with Envy." Memes appeared within hours. Green emojis flooded the comment sections. Viewers shared their own stories of dealing with entitled neighbors, and the video's reach expanded quickly. Local news stations picked up the story, replaying the footage of Karen's green transformation alongside the narrative of her repeated harassment. Karen's real estate agency was the first to react. Their Facebook page was bombarded with comments questioning how they could employ someone who trespassed and vandalized property. By Monday morning, the company released an official statement. "We pride ourselves on respect for property rights. The actions depicted in the video do not reflect our company's values. The individual involved is no longer affiliated with our firm." Karen's face, once the symbol of neighborhood authority, had become the face of entitled failure. But the fallout didn't stop there. The neighborhood group chat, previously silent or hostile toward Michael, erupted with activity. Messages poured in from residents who had previously been too afraid to speak up. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street wrote, "She did the same thing to us last Christmas, reported our decorations to the HOA for being too ethnic." Another neighbor added, "She tried to get our kids' basketball hoop removed, said it was ruining the look of the neighborhood." The dam had broken. People no longer feared Karen. They were ready to expose her. Karen, however, refused to back down. She recorded a video of her own, attempting to justify her actions. Sitting in what appeared to be her living room, she spoke directly into the camera, her face still faintly green under the lights. I was just trying to maintain community standards, she insisted. I care about our property values and safety. But instead of sympathy, the video triggered another wave of mockery. Commenters compared her to the Wicked Witch of the West. Memes circulated with captions like, "It's not easy being green," and "When you trespass and karma slaps back." Despite her attempts at damage control, Karen's situation worsened. Her husband, once a silent figure, was overheard at the local golf club venting to his friends. "Do you know how hard it is to close a real estate deal when your wife is literally green?" he complained. "She can't even show houses right now. People keep asking if she's sick." The story had become a local legend, impossible to escape. Michael maintained his professionalism throughout. Reporters knocked on his door, eager for a statement. He declined interviews, issuing only one simple response: "Everyone is welcome to use my pool. They just need to ask permission first." His calm, composed words only amplified the public support for him. The video continued to circulate, gaining millions of views. Even people outside Atlanta knew the story of the Green Karen. A week later, Michael noticed a for sale sign in front of Karen's house. The bright red letters felt like a victory lap. Karen, once the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, was packing up and leaving. Her face, once the epitome of suburban power, was now a symbol of defeat. But Michael didn't celebrate. Instead, he watched silently as the moving truck pulled away, Karen's pale and tired face barely visible through the window. With Karen gone, the neighborhood underwent a transformation. People who had once avoided Michael now stopped by to chat. Mrs. Rodriguez brought over homemade empanadas, her voice full of regret. "I should have spoken up sooner," she admitted. "We all should have." The Johnson family, who lived next door, shared their story about Karen trying to report their teenage son for loitering in his own driveway. Every family had a Karen story. Now, finally, they were free to tell them. Michael's backyard became the heart of the community. He organized weekend pool parties, sending out written invitations and setting clear boundaries. The same neighbors who once glared at him now laughed and shared food by his pool. Children splashed happily while parents chatted over drinks. For the first time since moving in, Michael felt truly at home. One evening, as the sun set and the smell of grilled ribs filled the air, Tom, from 2 doors down, leaned over and clinked his beer against Michael's. "You know," he said, "I've lived here for 20 years, and this is the first time I actually know my neighbors." Michael smiled, feeling the weight of months of tension finally lift from his shoulders. The running joke in the neighborhood became the green walk. The Rodriguez kids would tiptoe exaggeratedly past Karen's old house wearing swim gear, whispering loudly, "Don't tell Karen." Their parents laughed along, the memory of the green fiasco turning into a shared neighborhood legend. Real estate agents showing Karen's house were forced to explain the viral story. Buyers asked about the infamous green pool incident, and the agents assured them the dye was temporary and the issue had been resolved. Still, the stigma lingered. No one wanted to buy the house of the woman who became the face of entitled behavior. Karen made one final attempt at salvaging her reputation. She called for a community meeting to discuss dangerous chemical usage in pools. Only 3 people showed up, all wearing green ribbons in silent support of Michael. It was the final nail in the coffin. Karen disappeared from the community shortly after, her departure quiet and unnoticed by most. Michael's cameras, once a tool for defense, now captured birthday parties, swimming lessons, and summer barbecues. The HOA meetings became shorter, friendlier, and free of Karen's endless complaints. The neighborhood was finally at peace. 1 year later, Michael received an email from a local reporter. Karen, now living in another state, was causing trouble in her new neighborhood, demanding access to someone else's tennis court. Michael chuckled, marked the email as read, and stepped outside. He took a deep breath, the scent of freshly cut grass filling his lungs, and smiled as he watched his neighbors enjoy the pool. He understood now that the best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about living well, standing your ground, and showing others how to do the same. His pool had become more than just a luxury. It was a symbol of dignity, resilience, and community. As he floated peacefully in the water, Michael felt truly at home. Karen's departure left a noticeable void in the neighborhood, but it was not one anyone mourned. Her house, once the stage for so many of her schemes, sat quiet and empty with a bold for sale sign staked in the perfectly trimmed lawn. Week after week, real estate agents came and went, showing the property to prospective buyers who asked the same question every time. Was this the house from the video? The agents tried to downplay it, reassuring clients that the green dye was temporary and the issue resolved. But the story had taken on a life of its own. Karen's reputation lingered long after she was gone, a ghost haunting every open house and walkthrough. Meanwhile, Michael embraced the new chapter unfolding around him. His backyard, once the battleground of Karen's obsession, became the heart of the community. Every weekend, families gathered around the pool, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. Children played freely, parents relaxed without the constant fear of being watched or judged, and Michael finally felt like he belonged. What started as a personal victory evolved into a collective healing for the entire neighborhood. Michael's grill became legendary, his ribs drawing compliments from even the most reserved neighbors. Mrs. Rodriguez continued bringing her empanadas, and the Johnson family often stayed late into the evening, their kids splashing in the pool under the soft glow of the patio lights. Tom, from 2 doors down, made a habit of helping Michael set up for every gathering, their friendship growing stronger with each passing week. For the first time in a long time, Michael felt peace. The HOA meetings transformed as well. Without Karen's constant complaints and manipulations, the gatherings were shorter, more productive, and focused on real community improvements. The atmosphere shifted from tension and division to cooperation and mutual respect. Michael became an unofficial leader, his calm and fair approach earning the trust and admiration of his neighbors. One evening, as Michael set up for a Labor Day barbecue, Tom stood beside him, surveying the scene. "You know, Mike," he said, his voice carrying a note of reflection, "I've lived here for over 20 years. Never thought I'd see this neighborhood come together like this. Took a lot of guts to stand your ground. You didn't just fight for yourself, you fought for all of us." Michael nodded, the weight of the journey settling over him. "I just wanted to live in peace," he replied quietly. "Turns out that sometimes you have to fight for it." The children created a new tradition, turning the once infamous story into a game. They would sneak past Karen's old house wearing goggles and snorkels, whispering loudly, "Shh, don't tell Karen." The adults laughed along, the memory of the green pool party now a symbol of triumph rather than conflict. It became part of the neighborhood's lore, a story told at every gathering, always ending with the same laughter and shaken heads. As time passed, a new family moved into Karen's former home. An interracial couple with twin daughters, they were warmly welcomed by the community. Michael made it a point to introduce himself first, offering help with the move and extending an invitation to the next neighborhood barbecue. The twins quickly became regulars at the pool, their laughter echoing across the yard as Michael helped them practice their swimming. It was a fitting ending, a new chapter where diversity was celebrated rather than feared. One afternoon, one of the girls noticed a small framed photo near the pool gate. It showed a group of green-tinted women running through the neighborhood in their swimsuits, faces contorted in horror. "What's this?" she asked, giggling. Michael smiled, his eyes twinkling with quiet satisfaction. "That's a reminder," he replied, "a little lesson about respect and karma. You stand your ground, and sometimes the world stands with you." The security cameras were still there, but they captured different scenes now. Birthday parties, swimming lessons, late-night conversations under the stars. The backyard was no longer a fortress but a sanctuary where people gathered not out of fear, but out of friendship. Months later, Michael received an email that made him chuckle. A local news station had tracked Karen down in another state. She was making waves in her new neighborhood, demanding access to someone else's tennis court and filing complaints about property standards. Michael read the article, shook his head, and marked the email as read. Some people, he thought, never change. That evening, as the sun set over the sparkling pool, Michael leaned back in his lounge chair, a glass of lemonade in hand. He watched the neighborhood children play, listened to the easy laughter of his neighbors, and felt a profound sense of pride. He had not only protected his home, but helped transform the community into something better. The battle was never just about a pool. It was about dignity, respect, and standing tall when it mattered most. Michael understood then that the best revenge was not in making someone else suffer. It was in living well, creating a life so full of joy and connection that no one could ever take it away. His pool, once the center of so much conflict, had become a symbol of resilience and unity. As night fell, Michael stood and raised his glass toward the sky. "Here's to knowing your worth," he murmured, "and never letting anyone take it from you." The stars reflected off the pool's surface, the water calm and inviting. For the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly as it should be. Sometimes life has a funny way of proving that karma never misses. What do you think about this story? Have you ever faced someone like that? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read your stories. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story.